With the national shortage of bus drivers, the low pay, and the high responsibility, is there any reason that you can think why somebody would want to be a bus driver today?
About half of American children rely on school buses to get to and from the classroom. But it seems there are a growing number of road bumps in the way. Right now, school districts are struggling to hire bus drivers, largely thanks to the low pay and the job's demands. Well, now some school districts are taking a creative approach to get drivers behind the wheel. News Nation's Nancy Liu joins us now. Nancy, what have you learned about some of these unique incentives?
Well, they are hacks that are helping, but in many communities, physically getting kids to and from school every day remains a leftover lesson from last year. That has some parents stepping up and onto the bus.
Now, my interest was piqued because my son missed his bus by 1 minute, and that bus is always on time. It's crazy. Never miss a beat. It's here at the same time every single day. So I started to think, how much responsibility does a bus driver have? So I started pulling back some recent stories in just the past month, and I found a lot of instances where people are being charged with either child abuse or they're getting fired from their jobs because of something that they did as a bus driver. So here's what I want to do today. I want to look at these next 3 stories, and I want you to comment on each one of them and tell me, should the bus driver in each one of these cases, should they have been charged? Should they have been brought to jail? And in the case of Thomas Young, he's still sitting in jail today because his bail was set at $60,000. So I'm going to start with that story. However, before we get into that, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. We continue to grow the channel, and I appreciate that. And leave a comment down below. I'm going to give you 3 stories. So just so you can keep me honest, if you put number 1, number 2, or number 3 that you're commenting on, so I can kind of keep it in chronological order. And let's jump right into it. So first and foremost, we're going to start with Thomas Young, which is a story out of Oklahoma. Essentially, Thomas Young is a bus driver who wanted his students to calm down while they're on the bus. Now, the story basically goes that the students were getting up out of their seats, and you can see some footage that I'll include in this video. Much of the footage, other than Thomas Young, is going to be blurred out because of the students that are in here. So let's just watch a clip of this right now.
Jonathan and Tatum, the district gives drivers a lot of leeway when it comes to how they manage their buses, but they also have to follow protocols. The district says Young didn't entirely do that.
Sit down! I am not moving until you are quiet.
Bus video shows Thomas Young telling kids he wouldn't let them off the bus until they behaved, even after parents were banging on the bus windows. What the video doesn't show is kids jumping out of the back emergency exits while the bus was moving. District policies say the driver has the right to take control of the bus in a situation where kids are being loud or disruptive.
We have to give latitude to our drivers to make some decisions, but we expect that they're aligning their actions with the protocol that we have in place and that it's safe.
The district says in these types of situations, the driver shouldn't have pulled over on a busy street and should have turned on his flashing lights.
We do ask for drivers when the bus is out of control to pull over to a safe location, which wouldn't be a main street.
The driver, Thomas Young, was arrested by Broken Arrow police for kidnapping and child abuse. Many people are coming out in support of him. One saying online, "My son has ridden his bus for a year and a half and absolutely loves him. Says he's strict, but it's for the safety of the children on his bus." Another saying, "My daughter has been riding his bus for 2 months now and has said he stops the bus and makes sure kids settle down when they're out of control. She appreciates that he is strict and said it's always when needed. Good for him." The district also says it's investigating the behavior of some of the kids on that bus that day.
After you listen to that, you hear a couple of things in this news story. One, you're hearing about how Thomas did some things well, and there were some things that he didn't do well. So let's break that apart. First and foremost, he pulls over on a busy road. I don't know why this makes any difference whatsoever, other than the fact that some students took it upon themselves to open the back door of the bus and to jump out of the bus. Now, for me, any reasonable person that was driving that bus that wanted to have their students sit down and be quiet would have pulled the bus over anywhere they could have, and they would have never have been able to foresee that these junior high students would be able to open the back door and jump out of the bus because they didn't like sitting where they were sitting for 9 minutes. Now, is that a reason why somebody should be fired? Is this child abuse in your opinion because Thomas Young demanded that the students that were on that bus be quiet? Demanded that the students on that bus should sit in their seat? And ultimately did not and was not aware that the back door was coming open for people to jump out the back? Not only that, there's outrage from some of the parents because they were banging on the windows and banging on the doors trying to get to their students. Now, those are all true things. Now, keep in mind, Thomas Young is still in jail right now on a $60,000 bond, telling me he can't afford to get himself out because he decided to take it upon himself to pull the bus over safely, I might add, and demand that the students who are riding the bus, number one, be respectful. Number two, follow the first rule that he gives on that bus, which is to remain in their seats. And three, to remain quiet. Now, he wasn't asking anything crazy here. People were moving around and he had asked them to sit down. Now, that is his job as a bus driver. He should have the full support of the school board. He should have the full support of the parents. And he should also have the full support of the police department by doing all of this. Now, I don't know where this goes sour, okay? You do hear him getting a little bit loud. You could argue that he's yelling. He doesn't get out of his seat. He doesn't threaten anybody. The threat is he's not going to move until these students are behaving. Now, where did we in society decide that it was okay for our kids or even ourselves to behave like this and not to have any repercussions whatsoever from the person who is responsible for each one of these human beings that are on this bus? And people are upset. Now, the school board does come out, and you saw it in a clip, and they do say that he did a lot of things right, but he didn't follow protocol. Now, there was one protocol that there could be a good argument that he could lose his job over, and it is a safety one, and that's he didn't put his flashing lights on when he pulled over. Now, the argument on both sides could be he was stopped and nobody was intended to get off of that bus, so why would he put his flashing lights on, right? So there's that argument. The other argument could be because the bus was stopped, maybe a more seasoned bus driver might have recognized that there's a possibility that students that are getting out of hand might decide to jump out of the back. Now, that is up for debate, and I want to hear from you. That is bus number one. I want to hear from you. Do you think that Thomas Young should have been charged at all? Do you think Thomas Young should still be in jail today based off of what you've seen? And do you think this is child abuse, or do you think that this is a case where students got out of hand and they should be held accountable? Now, keep in mind, in the news story, you do hear that there's an investigation ongoing with certain students. Now, this is just my opinion, but those students that created this ruckus, their parents should go spend the same amount of time in jail that Thomas Young's serving, or so they truly understand the repercussions of the behavior of their children. Now, that all being said, you see in the story, these are junior high students. They should know how to be respectful. They should know how to be quiet. And they should know that when they open up the back door of a bus, that it's up to them, that they are making the decision to jump out, and that's their safety that they're putting at risk. That should not fall on Thomas Young. Again, just my opinion. I would like to hear from you folks. And if there are any bus drivers out there, I definitely want to hear from you. I want to hear, do you think this was right? Do you think this is wrong, and why? All right, case number two. Now, case number two is bus driver Elizabeth Carrero. And Elizabeth Carrero has a little bit different story than Thomas Young, but a very similar outcome. Yes, the police went to her home, they arrested her, and they booked her into the county jail. Now, here's a couple of things that are going on in this case, and there's a little bit of a difference in this case from Thomas Young. Now, Elizabeth goes and basically picks up a ton of students throughout the day. She picks up one student in particular who's 4 years old at about 7:30 in the morning, and that student ends up falling asleep on the bus. Now, Elizabeth goes through her route, and she thinks that she drops off all the students. She goes back home. Actually, first she ran a couple of errands. She went to the mechanic shop, and then she goes back home. She cooks breakfast, and one of the neighbors noticed that this little girl was getting off the bus and was sweating profusely, and ended up going to Elizabeth's house and knocking on the door saying, hey, there's a student that was left on your bus. Elizabeth does the right thing, calls the parents. The parents come over and they pick up the child. Now, little bit different. She is being charged with child neglect. Now, first things first, for the folks that have kids, this gets really emotional because you're thinking 4-year-old kid. You expect that when you put your kid on the bus that kid is getting to the place where they need to get to. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is Elizabeth did have some responsibility in this for sure. Now, do I think she should be charged with child neglect? I don't know. And here's why. First and foremost, right, she's picking up a ton of kids. Okay? Now, we know from the previous case that if she oversteps her bounds too much, she could go to jail and wait trial for child abuse. Now, some of you are saying, well, that's a little bit different. Thomas Young pulled the bus over, so on and so forth, right? So my question is, 2 different states, Elizabeth is in Florida, Thomas Young's in Oklahoma, both are getting charged 2 separate instances. What was Elizabeth to do? Now, I would think as a bus driver, one of the jobs that she should do is after all the kids get off, she should have to make a walk up and down. And we don't know if she didn't do that. We haven't seen the evidence yet, but a walk up and down the aisle to see if there's anybody left on the bus. Now, I do think that it's a responsibility of the daycare and or the school to say, hey, somebody didn't show up today, and then there should be an admin that reaches out to the parents. Now, this was a short time frame. It was 3 hours before that little girl was found. Now, for some of you, you're thinking like 3 hours. Well, it could take 2 to 2.5 hours for a school or a daycare to reach out to the parents anyways. So I do understand that. And yes, if it was a really hot day out, something could have happened to that 4-year-old child. I agree with all those things. Now, do I think that that should be child endangerment? Well, I would have to ask a few questions before that. Now, on the surface, yes. Because of what we already discussed, Elizabeth should have walked up and down the aisle and should have made sure that there was nobody on her bus. Now, did she have intent when she did this? No. But is ignorance, is that a good defense? It is not, right? So we understand that. But what things could we have done as parents, right? Number 2, as a school district. And number 3, as a community to prevent things like this from happening. So, hear me out on this one. First and foremost, right? Give that kid some technology, whether it's a watch, whether it's a phone, whether it's an AirTag, something that has a geofence that allows you as a parent to know when your child has arrived to school, when your child gets on the bus, and when your child arrives home. Okay? Very easy to obtain this technology, and it's technology that I promise you will help you sleep at night. And this is something that I think is a responsibility as a parent. It's something we could add to their backpack, and it's going to just make it a whole lot easier. Now, this is something that could be done through the school district. We see that there's tablets, there's laptops, there's funds for these things. We pay tax dollars. These are all things that could be minimized. You could work with your local carrier like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and you could, through IoT or the Internet of Things, you could come up with devices that would work for your kids. Believe me, I did this 10 years ago with my son. We got him a watch, we connected it, we knew where he's at, and he had access to us whenever he needed, and it was very limited to what he could do, so that way it didn't interrupt him while he was in school, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is that the school and the parents need to have some way to confirm when somebody is of that age that they arrived to school. Now, most schools are going to call and make those calls. And like I said, that could take 2 to 3 hours depending on how many children are showing up to a daycare or a school. But the parents need to be available as well. And this shouldn't fall entirely on Elizabeth. But again, I want to hear from you. She is being charged for child endangerment right now. And to me, it's kind of crazy because that's a lot of responsibility for somebody that's not making a lot of money, who probably does care about their job. And in this case, would have been an honest mistake. Number 3, this one was the crazy one to me. This is the one that I thought for sure this person was going to jail, and this is Amal Hanna. Now, just some backstory to this. Amal did suffer from cancer, was going through chemotherapy, and it has been stated that she doesn't have very good taste. Now, all that being said, she was caught on the bus with a White Claw seltzer, right? For all you folks that don't know what that is an alcoholic beverage, and she was driving students to school. Now, keep in mind, this is in New York, again, a different location, a lot of responsibility. Amal is 60 years old, lives with a roommate. She has her own non-alcoholic seltzers that are in the fridge. Her roommate had White Claws. She grabbed the wrong one, put it into her container. Somebody saw that it was a White Claw. They called it into the district. The district acted immediately, got her off of that route. And ultimately, what's being said now is she's not going to be charged, ultimately because it is an innocent mistake. Now, it is unclear if she's going to get her job back because of what happened. But out of all three of those cases, that was the one case I thought for sure that the person was going to jail because they were drinking alcohol while driving the bus. Now, again, going back to Elizabeth, ignorance is not a good defense. But in this case, in the state of New York, they said, yes, this is a good defense. We're not going to lay any charges on her. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think there should have been charges laid, or do you think, hey, it is an honest mistake? She has been through a lot, and I would like to acknowledge that. Cancer is not a very fun thing, right? I've never personally experienced it, but I have had people in my life that have passed away due to it, and it is Cancer Awareness Month. All things considered, right? Do we think that she should have been charged, or do we think that just her losing her job or being put on some administrative leave was good enough? Now, on the other side, do you believe that this may have happened before, or, did they do enough of investigation? Because she does say that she's not a drinker, so she wouldn't know the taste. Now, that does kind of contradict what she was saying, that she doesn't have good taste buds because of the cancer. I guess two things could be true at once, but they sounded like she was making two different defenses out of that. Now, this one is the one that would probably get me the most angered as a parent, that a bus driver was drinking while they were en route. Now, that doesn't mean I think that somebody should go to jail, especially if they weren't legally drunk, which in this case, it sounds like they weren't because they were drinking their very first seltzer. But I want to hear from you folks. What do you think? So again, if you could label it 1, 2, or 3 and what your comment is, do you think that they should have been held accountable? Am I off base on this one? Do we think that we should hold bus drivers to a higher standard? And if so, should we be paying our bus drivers more? Or is all of this accountability to bus drivers, giving them this fake accountability is what I'll call it, because very much like the news clip, we act like they should do something, but when they do something, they get in trouble for it, right? Should we pay them more, take some of that responsibility away, or should we come up with some more technology type stuff that could really help bus drivers out, like pressure sensitive devices on each seat, so that way when at the start of the year, each student gets a seat assigned to them, and every time they stand up during the bus, or every time they stand up when the bus is moving, that basically gives them an infraction. If they do it way too many times, they're invited not to ride the bus anymore because they've been deemed unsafe. And then that takes it out of the hands of the bus driver. So that way it's just a quick, easy transaction with the parents to either correct and find a new way to school, or correct it on the bus. Either way, I want to hear from you folks. That being said, if you stayed with me this long, I already said it once, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button down below. Hit that like. Let's get the video out. And leave that comment down below. This is your video for the week. I hope everybody has a wonderful week. Check out my shorts. I have one a day all the way through Christmas. That being said, have a wonderful week, everybody. I'm your host, Tim Sahlberg. Over and out.